Hi, everybody. I'm Lynn Castle, Executive Director, and it is my pleasure to introduce my friend, Stephanie Chadwick, who's the Assistant Professor of Art History at the Art Department at Lamar University, where she teaches classes in art appreciation, modern contemporary art, the history of photography, and global perspectives. Her research interests include modern European art theory, relationships between art, literature, and colonialism, and art of the multicultural exchange. She served as a teaching assistant and earned her PhD from Rice University in 2015 with a dissertation, Disorienting Forms, Jean Dubuffet, I'm probably not pronouncing that right.
Close enough.
Portraiture, ethnographic. Her research has been supported by a number of significant grants and has resulted in publications and presentations on Jean Dubuffet. Oh, Dubuffet, I was close, okay. And other modern and contemporary artists. And I really do know Dubuffet's work.
Yes,
I'm always just a little intimidated about how you pronounce French names. She's writing a book on Jean Dubuffet, Bright Color Portraits, Pistache, Performativity, contributes essays to the Educational Art History website, Smart History, and has served on the board of directors at the Art Studio and the Acquisitions Committee at the Art Museum of Southeast Texas. Will you please join me in welcoming Stephanie Chadwick?
I don't know if I need the microphone. Can people hear me? I'll take it if I need it. But I do want to thank the folks at AMSET for inviting me to be part of this Taste of the Arts series of talks. I think it's a really great idea. And I also want to especially thank you for inviting me to do the talk on this particular show. Because I have to say, I love this show, and not only do I love the works in the show, but I really love the way the show's installed, and it's really gotten me to think a lot about how I talk to my students about visiting museums and how the exhibition itself is a work of art in its own right. And no, AMSET did not pay me to say that. I've actually been hearing these kind of comments all around town, that people are really responding well to this show. So before I get started on that, though, I do want to say that a lot of you have been involved in a collaborative textbook that we've been writing, the art faculty at Lamar University, but also many community collaborators. AMSET, Lynn is one of the authors, and I want to thank Lynn and the other authors here at AMSET. I was supposed to receive copies of this book today, and I was hoping to bring a copy to Lynn, but instead I have my shameless plug for the book. But I just do want to thank the folks at AMSET, but also all the community collaborators. And you'll be hearing from me soon, because in about sometime next week, I should have copies of this book that I can share with people. So thank you for that. Thank you. So, okay, thank you. That's even better. I like that better. Yeah, I'm always thinking I don't want to conflict with the art we're looking at here. So, one thing I like is actually even with the title, Gulf Coast Lore and Lure. And I think the thing is the way these works are hung, it kind of lures us in. And, so what I like here is that right away, starting here in minute one, we come into this main gallery and we've got this kind of a picture, not just of local history and culture, but of this idea of a diversity of histories and cultures in this region, and how there's a kind of a richness of these different voices and interpretations. And also we've got kind of a historical continuum. And so one thing I really, really like about this piece by Alexander Hogue here is that it's Spindletop, 1901. So it's not just about a history, but also about these kind of mythic stories, that become like kind of like part of the creation myth of a region that are really important just to kind of shape identity. And so I like that, but the other thing I really like about it is that it's got these rail lines. So it's already got this, one of the themes that comes up here in the show is dynamism. There's a dynamism in the region. And so you've got these rail lines that kind of just encourage you to just kind of come on and be part of this locomotion going on here. And then that takes us right into this really great painting here by Kermit Oliver called the Katy. So it's about this rail line but again, this idea of a diversity of histories. And actually, Oliver was a student of, he's a really significant painter, a really important painter, and he studied under another very important painter, formerly in Houston, so John Biggers, and he's a really famous muralist. You can see these murals at Texas Southern and University of Houston campuses and in other parts of the region. And so, Oliver liked his paintings to be a little bit more about personal histories, but also he liked to bring in kind of mythic content. And so what I think is kind of cool about this is we've got these, realism going on, the same kind of realism that you kind of start to see in this lithograph from 1941. Now we're coming into 1970s, 1973. But so you still got realism, but there's this kind of little element of like almost magic realism, or kind of a hint, just a hint at something else going on. And one of the things that Oliver liked to do was, and in later works especially, he would bring in mythic content. But he liked to think about things like transitional states, right? And so what better for that than thinking about changes in history, but also an actual movement in terms of a rail line that's no longer actually functioning anymore. And one thing I really like about the way this is hung now is that there's also kind of a unification of the diversity going on here, because when we come over here to this, I like this, we have an intimate painting by John Alexander, so another very famous painter from the region, who has said time and again that the landscape here, so the landscape is another element that comes out strongly in this show, that no matter where he's lived, the land and the culture here in this region has really impacted his work. And he does many large paintings, but I really like the intimacy of this, and that it's a landscape painted, pretty close to the same time as this work by Oliver, but in a more abstracted vocabulary. But then when I stand here and I'm kind of encouraged to move through this group, I love not only the motion, but the fact that you've got the palette now that's kind of unifying these two works, and kind of even leads us over here to this Dorothy Hood's very abstract painting, still conceived as a kind of a landscape, sounds of the earth, but we've got this beautiful kind of warm earth tone palette that kind of moves us from this kind of realist vocabulary all the way into a very abstract vocabulary, but all very much impacted by the landscape in this region. So I'm not going to talk about every work in the show, but this is one pathway. I like to think about pathways through the show, and I think this was a very well-constructed pathway, kind of takes people around the gallery. But I also really like the split here, right at the door. It's like a forked pathway that you can kind of decide where you want to go at this point. But look, we've got this, the lithograph here, the print, that's in this, kind of a monochromatic tonality. It's got the realism, and that takes us right over here into the photographic prints. And I really love that this photograph by Keith Carter, another very famous artist from the area, is nice enough to join us today. And you've got the same idea about dynamism and a multiplicity of histories. There's, I don't know how well people can see this, but there's a boy in the back of this trailer. So, it looks like a stationary trailer, but you still have the idea of wheels and movement. And then you start to think more too about, I think, personal histories. So the fact that we're not just looking at regional or cultural histories, but that these are all made up of these kind of intimate personal histories. And I think, I know that Keith Carter has been called a poet of the ordinary, yeah? But that's the thing. There's something mysterious here. So it's not just about histories now. There's a suggestion of mysteries as well. That there's kind of some enigmatic, kind of interesting things going on. And it makes us think of the art history of the region as well. So the arts and cultural history. So I like that. We've got this kind of multiple histories going on. And of course that takes you through this whole other pathway. And we've got these photographs by Dave Anderson here. And he is not a Texas photographer, but a photographer who's been very greatly influenced by Keith Carter's work, and I think that comes across here in the images. But again, you get this idea of, these were taken in Viter also, I should say, this series. And you get this idea of how this kind of connection of maybe quirky personal moments and personal histories they coalesce to create a kind of interesting, dynamic cultural history for us. And I also have to say, I love the way these photos wrap around this wall where you can kind of look in here and see the large scale blow up of the photograph of Fox Harris, right? Who's, here we go, and there's another Keith Carter important connection here. But just this idea that there are lots of different ways of looking at art and making art and thinking about art that have happened right here in this area. And one thing I want to say is that's exactly the kind of thing that we're stressing as collaborative authors in the textbook, because we really want students to know you can see all kinds of great art right here, and this is a great exhibition. It really makes me appreciate being here. So I'm going to kind of follow this path in here into this next gallery, and then of course it's really dominated by this huge and this has a couple of there's I think multiple interesting stories associated with this one painting. And I think there's even a personal story here, right? Is it correct that this painting came from Alex Irvine?
Yes.
Yes, so because I think Kathy was telling me that it was a very commanding painting in someone's home to actually be confronted with this huge painting. And this is actually featured in the textbook as well, so that's why I wanted to talk about it. And I was thinking about these kind of dialogues between all these different artworks we've been looking at, and here I'm really struck by the dialogue between very large and very small, right? Got this really intimate nocturne kind of landscape by Sharon Capriva, next to this giant painting by David McGee. And then here's another thing that I think starts to happen now, is you start to see even a little bit more of these suggestions of kind of surrealist undertones maybe, because you've got this really kind of sickeningly yellowish sky. The landscape is, you know, it's naturalistic, but it's got a dreamlike quality, and there's something, aside from the guy's really creepy face, he's got a really creepy face and really pretty intense and creepy eyes. The whole land itself seems just off, you know? And the title of this painting is The First White Man I Ever Saw. And so I thought that was really intriguing, because I'm thinking, you know, I've only met David McGee a couple of times, you know? I don't know him very well, but he's a really fascinating person to talk to, but he's a pretty young guy, you know? So I was like, what's going on with the title of this? And I was happy to get to read the AMSET, had some information about this. So McGee is a Houston-based artist, but he's from Louisiana, but he lived in Detroit, Michigan, right? He was in Detroit specifically, though, right?
Yeah.
And then he returned to Louisiana with his family and was doing some work on a local farm. And so it was a culture shock for him after being in Detroit area and, you know, having a lot more diversity and a more equitable situation, to then be kind of being treated as a servant, basically, working on this guy's farm. So I thought the title was kind of cool. It's like the first one of those white guys he's ever seen that he remembers, and it's kind of about the childhood, you know, memories involved as well. And of course, watermelons is a crop, sure, but it's also associated with stereotypes, right? So, and then what I thought was really crazy though is the fact that this guy is, you know, he's in this, you know, imperial Napoleonic stance, and he's even got the hand in the jacket like Napoleon. So I really don't know, but I know Louisiana, you know, I don't know if David has ever talked about that, but I mean, we've got the kind of, the thing is there's a lot of quirky histories and combinations of histories, and I think Louisiana is a great example of that. You know, you've got the Louisiana Purchase and the fact that Napoleon was part of Louisiana even becoming part of the United States. So it's kind of a collision of histories. And then Mariah and I were talking a couple weeks ago, some of these works also do just kind of let us see that not only is it a diversity of histories, but we can think about underrepresented histories, misrepresented histories. So there's a lot going on. And then again, I like this juxtaposition with this really intimate, small nocturne here. And if people are familiar with Sharon Capriva's work, a lot of her work has themes that deal with transitional states, but also I think death, you know, mortality. There's some creepiness going on sometimes, and you can sort of pick up on this theme kind of emerging here as well. But also, when I look at this, I think about a movement that actually predated Surrealism, the Symbolist movement actually from the late 19th century, that wouldn't just think of a nocturne, when you're thinking about kind of a moonlit landscape, we're not just thinking about the land, but we're also thinking about dream-like qualities and interiority, like inner thoughts and emotions, and even sensuality, and maybe even sexuality, you know, so there's a lot going on with a work like that. But then I just love the way you've got this kind of flow here. You've got this David Idle where it kind of moves you around the gallery. And I want to talk about just a couple more pieces in here. I like the way now we're also picking up kind of this surrealist feeling. You've got this piece here by Dixie Friend Gay where you've got this kind of parquet floor that's juxtaposed with lush, you know, tropical sort of landscape, and then also this bird, which looks like, you know, possibly a dead bird. So again, maybe some themes about unusual juxtapositions are something that I study a lot in my work because I'm interested in artists who are influenced by surrealism. But you also have this interesting frame that's kind of, you've got two paintings kind of connected within this frame that makes us think about everyday objects, but also things like imagery that you might see in dreams that don't really go together, that might evoke ideas, or even fears or anxieties or desire. And so I love, again, now we've got this kind of bird also. The bird's kind of gonna carry us the rest of the way through this show, I think, because it takes us right here to this Mark Messersmith painting, which is this incredible palette. I just love the vivid, you know, intensity of these colors. And then, you know, you've got so many really beautiful, lively, again, dynamism, you know, flying birds. You can think about the lush tropical, I say tropical, but the lush Gulf Coast, you know, landscape, the kind of marshy, humid, life kind of everywhere. But then you also have these juxtapositions with things that look, you know, maybe kind of dangerous, like electrical wires that look like they might be becoming a little bit frayed. Kind of maybe, you know, make you think a little bit more about ecology, you know, thinking about environmental concerns in the region as well. And then, again, even though this isn't a surrealist work per se, it's got this interesting mixed media thing going on here that includes these objects at the bottom. That, and again, there's a bird here that, you know, you get the sense of like maybe almost a bird on a dissecting table or something. So you think about a bird flying is actually symbolic for transitional states. So there's this interesting, I love the way the bird is carrying us through this show. And also we're going to start to see fish and things now as well. So I'm going to come around this way and I'm going to head to the other gallery next door. But I just want to stop by this David Everett sculpture, because here we have another interesting juxtaposition of things that don't normally go together this way. But we've got a bird again, and now an alligator and fish. So again, really connecting with this idea of the kinds of things that you see in the Gulf Coast region. Maybe not like that, all in an arrangement with the bird and the alligator as friends. But that brings us right into one of my favorite walls in the whole show, actually. This is, I really love this arrangement here. I love the dialogue between these three works. And, you know, as someone who paints, and I'm very interested in painting, I'm really struck by the David Bates painting. And we get into this room, we start to see a kind of a collision between what used to be called fine art and folk art. And of course, this show is about works from the permanent collection. And so AMSET, not only does AMSET collect works from all these wonderful artists from the region, but also is one of the first museums in the United States to really start a significant collection of folk art. So I like this gallery for that reason, and that there are these kind of juxtapositions. But I really just love the form of this particular painting. I mean, it's, you know, it's got this really dramatic linear quality, but it's also, you know, it's kind of crudely rendered. And that crudeness and the really thick layers of paint, that gives it this sense of dynamism, as if this bird is really just swooped down, you know. And of course, we've got the fish here that the bird is catching. And I really love the way that works with these two pieces. So this Anti-Don Emmons sculpture here, that's wood, it's wood, tar, and paint, but actually the fact that it's sticks that are stuck in there for the wings, you know, that crudity just works so well here, but also it gives it this kind of dynamism. And then, of course, down here we've got this Charles Kreiner. This is a lino, it's a linoleum print or a lino cut, which takes on, it's very similar to a woodblock print, except it's in linoleum, but you get the same kind of, you know, a little bit more direct, more kind of I shouldn't use the word crude probably, but that's what I'm going to go with. There's kind of a crudeness to it, and that's why a lot of early 20th century modernists used to really like to work in woodblock prints and also lino prints, because you get a sense of the handmade process that's going into kind of carving out this image and then inking it up and printing it. But I just love the way the linear qualities of this, and this is a baiting hook is what it's called. So it's, you know, it's an African American guy baiting going fishing, baiting his hook, but it just works so wonderfully with these sticks in this woodpecker and how that kind of brings us over this really awesome painting. And then that actually just kind of can take your eye around the gallery where you've got this whole collection of the kinds of wildlife that you see in this region, and even there's an owl up there on the wall. And so, you know, I'm going to conclude here, but I really just do want to say I think this is a great show, and it makes me really appreciate to have AMSET as a resource and have so many great artists that I'm learning more about all the time. So, thank you.
And a great collection.
Great collection.
So I do want to credit our curator, Mariah Rockefeller.
Yes.
She's relatively new to the museum, and
It's great.
at first when she started pulling this stuff out, I was like, what are you doing? And then when she put it all together, I was like,
I love it.
hey, this is really
I
cool.
love it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
really
so
do.
she did a really great job. If you enjoyed today's talk, will you do me a favor? Get out your phones or go home, run home, and get on your laptop and like us on TripAdvisor.
Oh,
Because TripAdvisor, we've been getting some kind of not so good reviews, and we want to boost our, it hurt my feelings.
that hurt my feelings
It
too.
hurt my feelings. So anyway, get on TripAdvisor. If you don't know how to get on TripAdvisor, all you have to do is Google it, Google TripAdvisor, and then you rate us. And so give us a good review, because we need it. We need help. So please do that for us today. And we have lunch, a buffet. It's a Dutch treat, which means that you will pay for your lunch. The museum will not pay for your lunch because we're a nonprofit and we can't afford it. We're sorry, but you're welcome to join us.
Right.
You're welcome to join us in the library. And
Yes.
Dennis has a very important announcement.
Well, I am?
You
Yes. Tonight is
I
our
thought there were
faculty
questions. I
show.
thought there were questions.
Oh, okay, question.
No, I
But
do.
then you also have
I'm just kidding. I just want to throw out, Stephanie and I have talked about this exhibition, and I think it's great as well. But I do want to say, not only is Stephanie an excellent teacher, but she is also a very good painter. And
As a hobby.
I just want to let everyone know that she has two paintings at the Dishman Art Museum
faculty
right
shows.
now, and they're part of our faculty
Yes.
exhibition. The opening reception, I'll keep this going, the opening reception is tonight at 6:30, and everyone is invited. So bring your
Yes,
friends.
please come if you can. We'd love to see you at the
And
faculty
we can
show.
critique her painting.
You can critique it. That's
Hang
right.
on.
As long as I'm not getting a grade.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Fantastic tour, right, guys?
Yeah, it's really wonderful.
So you're welcome to join us in the library, right, Mariah? Are we eating